Well, greetings and happy solstice. I wanted to record an end of year message for Sector 39, reflect on our work really of the last couple of years and look to ways forward, and to kind of invite you into that space, and also to recognise some of the amazing work that's been done by some of our team members in this what has been a challenging year. So I work for Sector 39, a training organisation. We use permaculture design to support people to develop personal resilience, food security, enterprise, housing, and yeah, permaculture is a design process that helps us harmonise with nature and with natural forces, and I think that's something essentially, absolutely essential at this time in our history. So jump back a couple of years. That's us in June 2018 in northern Uganda, a place called Numanzi. Three of us at the back from Wales, a training team with Grace and Khalad, and the guys in the front, Ali, Paul, Vicky, and Gerald, from Uganda and Kenya. And we worked with them in 2016, 2017 on permaculture training, and in 2018 we had a chance to take this to some of the world's biggest refugee settlements and set up a training of trainers program there, which I just heard has been refunded going forward into 2021. So that's wonderful to hear. That the people that we trained are still now active in the field. In 2020, we got to invite welcome Stella Amuge onto our team. Stella is a student of project evaluation. It's going to be a very useful contribution to our work. Here she is at the famous Nero rock paintings in Uganda, in eastern Uganda. Could be 2,000 or 3,000 years old, as far as we know. And I put this in, and looking at this, what made me think was permaculture is a pattern language. How do we make sense of our complex, ever-changing world through generalizations, through seeing the patterns? Now, I don't claim to know exactly what this amazing and beautiful symbol exactly communicates, but to me, it's about making sense of complexity and about finding our place within our ever-changing world. And that resonates very strongly with what permaculture is. Permaculture is a pattern language which communicates sustainability. This allows us to find a harmonious relationship with the living world. And also I wanted to say that permaculture, through this pattern language, it's easily translatable, it's easily understood, it travels well. We all experience the sort of natural world in the same way. Simplistically, I like to say, water flows downhill, whether you're a Christian or a Muslim, Sunni or Shia, Catholic or Protestant, it's the same for all of us. And also that 50% of the world's food is still produced by small farmers. And I think that's very much the fate of the world, of the natural world, what comes next, is in the hands still of the majority of the people. And that should give us some hope. And that's why I also see the value in working together like this. Patterns of resilience. So isn't it interesting how individuals cluster together to create strength, to create resilience? Whether it's those individual houses clustered together into homesteads, to family groups, and how those family groups now clustered together to create a bigger, stronger sort of community. And also think about how the functionality, about the way these things have been arranged strategically to allow the function of the cattle to come into the central enclosure where they're safe at night, and so forth. So again, this sort of patterns of resilience. How do we? So permaculture again is very interested in building mutually beneficial relationships through a sort of a patterning, clustering together. And I think this picture represents that very interesting. So you don't need me to tell you really, but we are in the middle of not just one, but multiple global crises. And I think, what we need to take from that is understanding that our current paradigm, our current way of thinking, our current sort of economic models is they've reached their climax, they've reached their, not their end, but they've reached their maximum. And from here, we have to move away very quickly. We are on the edge of a period of intense change. And I want to put this into a sense of this is evolution, or should we say a renaissance. At the Wales Real Food and Farming Conference, they talked about a renaissance in farming and agriculture, where we re-embrace natural processes. We really understand that it's about our relationship to this living natural world. That's the evolution that we need to take. So all of the terrifying things, economic things, climate change and extreme weather events and coronavirus, all of these are a product of the breakdown of our relationship with the living world. And this is what we have to rapidly incorporate into our thinking, into our outlook. So here's a way of looking at it. If this was a 24-hour clock, and we've been around on this planet for about 4 billion years. In terms of evolution in that time frame is, humans have been around for less than 1.5 minutes. 1.5 minutes of 24 hours. And in that time, we've removed the whole of the equatorial forest belt. We've changed the composition of the atmosphere of the planet. We've filled the seas full of plastics. We've eroded away significant topsoils. We've killed more than half of the other vertebrate animals. Enormous destruction has happened in a very short space of time. If we can take a single positive from that, it's if we can cause that much damage in 200 odd years, or a few hundred years, then we can restore it and replace it perhaps in equally fast or faster time span. That's what we have to do. We don't have 200 years to fix this. We don't have 20 years to fix this. This decade is the one that counts. We have to, what we do in the 2020s sets the trajectory for the future. We should all know this and be aware of this. Okay, I don't want to talk to you about global warming. We know it. In fact, 5 years ago, we're just now celebrating 5 years of the signing of the Paris Climate Accord, 2015, December 2015. The argument's over. What we need to focus on is what we're going to do about it, how we respond. And that is, again, what the Paris Agreement is about. You know, even this week, I actually blocked the first person I've had to block on Twitter. Someone still trolling me about, climate change, is it real and stuff. And I've got nothing left to say on the subject. I'm sorry, if you can't read the science and understand it for yourself, I don't think there's anything that I can say that's going to change what you think. I'd rather put my time somewhere else. So I hope you don't feel offended that I blocked you, but I've got nothing to say. We know it's happening. It's about how we're going to respond. That's where I'm at. And if we were to look at all this data that's out there, is the emissions in the Western countries have not gone down. We're not taking this seriously anywhere near that we need to. America, USA, and UK like to say, well, our emissions have gone down significantly over the last 20 years. In fact, what's happened in the last 20 years is we've shut down the coal-powered power stations, the dirty and most polluting form of power generation, electricity generation, and we switched to gas, which is still bad. It's just not as bad as what it was. So we're less bad as we was. But the other thing that we've done, of course, is we've exported all of our heavy industry to China. And so then the balance on the carbon sheet, that looks like our carbon emissions have gone right down, and they haven't. If you factor in exports and imports, they have gone up. So we can't start to feel virtuous about what we've done. We have to understand we are still at the very beginning of our renaissance, and we cannot shirk away from this. This is the temperature anomaly. It's very, very loud, and it's getting louder by the day, by the year. And of course, the coronavirus hasn't come out of a vacuum. It hasn't come out of a void. We've been told it's coming. We've been warned. And as we erode into the natural world, as we come closer and closer against sort of wild wilderness areas, we're creating more and more opportunities for viruses that we have not been exposed to before to cross over. Small mutations mean they suddenly can attack human populations. This is not going to change. Coronavirus is the first of many viruses waiting for us if we carry on as we are. This picture I found on the internet, a gentleman from Africa wearing a banana leaf as a face mask. Kind of amusing. I kind of like the idea of it's biodegradable and it's not part of the sort of financial economy. But there's nothing funny about this, and in fact, we've left the majority world, as ever, to struggle to deal with this crisis, which they're not prepared for, and which is not of their making. So 2020. So we face 2021, we approach the solstice, which is on Monday. I wanted to share this image with you. This is the Chinese character which communicates the idea of the I Ching. I Ching is follows the Taoist philosophy about understanding our relationship with change. A philosophy that understands that change is inevitable, change is constant, but also change follows patterns like seasons, cycles, and that we can begin to, by understanding that this constant process of change, we can reflect about where we are as individuals within that cycle, how we fit into it. And I think this is very apt for the moment in time that we now find ourselves. Also, another lovely internet image that just pops up on my screen one day of this blue ringed octopus. That's striking. What I notice about it is the blue rings are so striking that you fail to see the whole of the octopus. You think you're looking at, I don't know what, some individual little things, and you're losing sight of the actual creature behind it. I don't know if there's a lesson in that, or something about how nature, I don't know, operates. But to my eyes, it looks so alien and crazy that there's a real beauty in it, and I coming back and thinking about that, thinking differently in other ways. Look, everything that we do needs to communicate and express a relationship with the natural world. I don't know whether this is the exact answer to housing or anything, but the point is, here's a building, standard building, but it has an enormous amount of vegetation on it. Plants, flowering plants which feed insects, insects which feed birds, birds which cycle phosphate, phosphate which adds to the fertility of the soil, which helps plants grow, which helps drive the cycle. And it's this ignoring of all of these relationships and an erosion into that natural capital that is causing our problems. So in everything that we do, even if it's as mundane as throwing up an apartment block, it needs to express a positive, dynamic relationship with nature, with the atmosphere, with the air. It's cleaning air, it's cleaning water, it's feeding in microbes, feeding insects. We need to incorporate this into every action that we do to begin to restore our balance with the natural world. And let's also think about how we see our world and our relationship to the world. So at the space program was that 1969, that gave us the image of the Earth in space, that blue marble picture. That first image that told us that the world's finite. It's hanging there in space. As a unique, almost an organism of its own. That was the image of the 70s, of the 80s, and the 90s, really, of the sort of globalization, seeing the world as a whole, as a unique, as a single thing. Maybe this image is the image of how we should be seeing the world in the 2020s. To throw away that sort of colonialist globe that put imperial Europe at the top and in the center. To understand that, if we were to peel the surface of the globe like the skin of an orange and lay it out flat. This is a more representative, a more accurate way of visualizing our world. Maybe Western Europe is just at the periphery. We sit on the edge of the continent, on the edge of the Atlantic. And maybe the focus of attention is now moving to Asia, China, anyway, and in parts of Africa. We're getting a sense of the relative size of the countries and continents. And also it's including Antarctica, which is always kind of trivialized in an old-fashioned map. So how we see the world probably affects very much how we feel about it and how we relate to it. So I live in a cooperative. I work within permaculture, which is a very cooperative, sort of relationship-driven way of thinking. And the originator of cooperatives, the guy who created the very first mutual company, it's a guy called Robert Owen. He was born in 1771 in Newtown in Wales, in Paris, in the county that I live. So in 2021, we will be celebrating 250 years of Robert Owen. I think that's an enormous thing to be contemplating. And of course, Robert Owen predates Karl Marx. His ideas influenced socialism, an aspiration for a more harmonious way of being. This quote from Robert is an interesting one. He says, "Nature requires its own time to mature all things, whether mineral, vegetable, animal, or mind and spirit." Nature requires its own time to mature all things. Are we reaching a time of maturity? Are we reaching a time of maturity of mind and spirit where we can now re-embrace nature into our mindset, into our sort of cultural construct, into our economic thinking? I think this is essential. And I think that Robert's ideas are tremendously important here now in 2021. I live in a village in Wales called Llanrydder y Mochnant. It's named after this waterfall, Pistis Ryder. I think it's the largest single drop waterfall in England and Wales or something like that. Let's just think about this. Think about this idea about ecosystem services. Think about what nature is doing. This water represents rainfall that's fallen over a huge area of the Bearwyn Mountains. That water's percolated down through heavily peated soils, where it's filtered and cleaned, where then it cascades down this waterfall, it interacts, smashes off the rocks, it folds in air, it's oxygenated, it's revitalized, and returns to the river, ready again to nourish our environment and people. This is what nature does for us. And as we erode into the fabric of nature, nature is losing some of its ability to restore and regenerate itself. This should be of great concern to us. So this picture represents this aspiration for re-embracing the natural power of nature to heal, to regenerate, to clean itself, to take us forward. This is my permaculture message for 2021. Above us in the hills is Vyrnwy Dam. This was built in 1900. It seals off a valley which then became flooded, and it is the water reservoir for the city of Liverpool, to the northwest of England, where there's many big cities and towns. And again, this shows a relationship between the mountains of Wales and the populated areas of England, and again encourages us to think very much how much we are dependent on natural resources and on sort of structural design that makes those resources available to us. One of my personal heroes and the author of the book The Living Soil in the 1940s was this Lady Eve Balfour, and she was the first person really to describe the complexity of microbial life in the soil. She was also the first person, I believe, to really understand the importance of mycorrhizal fungi. There's amazing fungi that fuse with the roots of plants and make them many times more resilient, and expand the surface area of their roots by many times, and stronger and more able to grow. Lady Eve tells us that the health of soil, plant, animal, and man is one and indivisible. If the nutrients aren't available in the soil, then they're not available in the plant, they're not available in the animal, and they're not available in the food that we eat, so we in turn become depleted. Our food is the soil, and we have to build our relationship to the soil. This is the essential lesson that Lady Eve taught us. So our little housing co-op in Llanrydder is called Dragons. It's named after a shop that's within the building. And this is our allotment. It doesn't grow all of our food, but it does supply some of our fresh greens, and it gives us a chance to return our organic waste back to the soil. Again, thinking so important. Every household individual needs to have a way to build a relationship back to the soil, to return nutrients, to create microbially rich, fertile soils that in turn can feed us and nourish us. It's not just about us in Wales. Mutually beneficial relationships is what permaculture is about. And over the last few years, we've been building relationships to our friends and colleagues in Uganda. This gentleman is from the Mount Elgon Coffee and Honey Co-operative. They have a wonderful waterfall there too in Mount Elgon. Here it is. And in eastern Uganda. And Mount Elgon is a huge volcanic mountain range right on the border between Uganda and Kenya, close to the equator. Very fertile, very rich soils. And here you see Roger's Wasibi clambering around on the rocks, and you can see it's a very steep mountainous region. Now, what happened in Mount Elgon previous decades is was a lot of deforestation. Poor people have very little economic opportunity. One of the things that they can make money from is making charcoal, which is the main energy source for cooking in Africa. So there's been a lot of deforestation in the area, which can lead to landslides, even whole villages getting washed away in heavy tropical rainfalls. So the Mount Elgon Coffee and Honey Project is supporting the communities to rebuild the native forest, to replant the native forest, but to underplant it with coffee and with bee-friendly plants, so that the coffee and honey provides an income, which means then that the people don't need to cut the trees. The cooperative is of 700 farmers who are working together to make a product which we are importing in small batches to UK, and again building that relationship. And I've got to say, it's really great coffee. It's much better than anything I've ever had before. I didn't really realize that there was so much to know about coffee. This is a fantastic product, and to understand that it's literally planting trees in Africa and building communities makes you understand, okay, this is what a regenerative economy might look like, right? We've deliberately built relationships that have long-term beneficial outcomes for people and environment, not cost cutting to the degree that what we do results in erosion and deforestation. So the focus of the work for 2020 has been to kind of bring together a partnership between various elements that we've been working with over recent years through the Permaculture Association of Britain, Sector 39, that's our organisation, and funded with some seed money from the Arkelton Trust. We've been working with our African partners, including Rwanda Women's Permaculture, Eastern Uganda Permaculture, Perma Africa, Kenya, to build a partnership to identify and support innovators, and with those innovators to build teams, training teams, so that we can bring permaculture to where it is needed. This picture is from 2018 in Western Uganda, the first East African permaculture convergence, a chance to bring together many of the sort of pioneering people from that region. And from then, we've been trying to identify, work with, if you like, the innovators and the people that we have strong relationships with. People like Ali Tabandeki, who is developing a permaculture learning centre at a place called Butambala in Uganda, working closely with his community. There's lovely pictures of some of his work. He's currently in South Africa as a permaculture ambassador, where he's working with communities there in Johannesburg, amongst other places. And how important is it to create demonstration centres that people can be inspired by, can look at and go, yeah, I could do that. It's not hard. It's about having a method and a process and a plan and setting that in motion. Things grow slowly once you get it right. Same in Rwanda. And Rwanda Women's Permaculture is not about just working exclusively with women. It's about identifying that, especially in Africa, especially in the majority world, a large amount of crops that are grown to be eaten as food are produced by women, and we need to identify and support that and recognize and value that. By working with women, we can create a design for food. We can create much more food security. This is Save School in Rwanda, a new school, a state school, but one that's on steep slopes, one that's suffering gully erosion from water as it crosses the school, crosses the landscape. So let me introduce you to Rose Nibagweri from the southern district in Rwanda. And here she is propagating avocado trees. It's just tree nursery. It's part of a wider project. Here they are making a huge compost heap from the cow manure from the cows from the school farm. And with these trees, with this manure, with this fertility, they are re-landscaping the school to reduce the erosion, engaging with the students to plant food forests. And here we see the avocado trees going in next to what we call a swale, a contour ditch that's there to receive rainfall and allow that rainfall to infiltrate into the soil, but over time it will feed the fruit trees. So thinking about relationships between the water, the fertility, the trees, the kids in the school, and the cycles that we could build around that, which would then create abundance. When we study permaculture, we study the natural world, we very quickly realize that soil is so important. Soil is the basis for all terrestrial life. It's the repository of carbon. I think all those dead leaves and dying trees and sticks and things break down, and as they enter the soil, they remain there, can remain there a very long time. High carbon-rich soils can absorb and hold water better, and therefore have more air within them, and better serve the soil microbes from which plants derive their fertility. So we have to understand that soils are fragile. They should not dry out. They should never be exposed to the sun, to the light. They should be covered. If we're not with living plants, with dead matter, with organic matter. We should have cover crops and legumes, and if we don't have those, then we should put dead plant matter on it, which should be protecting them. Things we call mulches. We should be returning biological waste, and not compacting the soil by standing on it, driving on it, by managing grazing animals very carefully. All of these things become central to creating healthy soil. So one of the things that we're trying to do within permaculture very quickly is to develop people's empathy with soil, with the fact that it's alive, with this incredible web of life that's within it, that Lady Eve Balfour described. So let's think of simple techniques that we can create raised beds that have a vector within a pathway within them, so that we can constantly return organic matter. Doesn't matter, it doesn't have to go you understand that the worms, the microbes within the soil will be transporting those nutrients around. So as long as they're available, they will be circulated. So these things, like these very simple raised beds made out of locally available materials, are there to slowly bring people's attention to the relationship of the living soil, to see how over time it develops. How easy it is to make something like a keyhole bed from just whatever you have lying around, local materials, and it's somewhere then to put your organic matter. Suddenly now you're valuing all those old dry leaves that before perhaps you didn't. You've got somewhere for them to go. If you layer organic matter into soil, it can absorb and hold rainwater better, and we can use it as mulches to protect it from the hot sun. We can make these beds out of any kind of materials that we happen to have lying around. And look, what we get is this beautiful, nutrient-dense, very nutritious foods. In poor income communities, people eat a lot of starches. They eat mainly, whether it's rice, maize flour, cassava, or whatever, sweet potatoes, and maybe some beans or pulses for protein. But there's often a lack of greens and what we call the really nutrient-dense, very, very important foods. So these are very easy to grow. There's no reason for people to go without. It's just that it's best to produce these from outside of the monetary economy, from outside of a farming economy. Do it through gardening around communities, gardening around schools. It becomes very possible. Here's a set of beds in a community in Kenya. So they've reached now the dry season, and there's a group of farmers considering what they're going to grow in the next season. And you can imagine how year on year these things can really grow and build. You're building soil and you're valuing the soil. Here's another. This is again in Kenya, a slightly bigger scale system. And look how this old gentleman, this Mzee, how he might be able to access these vegetables so much easier without having to bend right down. We've got a very raised bed, makes it easy to access, and also makes it very clear that we're not going to stand on that soil. It's not going to get compacted because we've got a very clear pathway. And the bed is sized such that we can reach over it without having to stand on it. September 2020, we worked with the Eastern Uganda Permaculture Organization to deliver a PDC, Permaculture Design course, in partnership with, also funded by Arkwright Trust, in Kumi, Uganda, at a place called Kumi Happy Home. We're very thankful to them for hosting our course and giving us a chance to train another 40 people who we hope will go on to be trainers of trainers, community leaders in permaculture in this particular region of eastern Uganda. Using tippy taps there for hand cleaning, not always running water available, wearing masks, of course, as well in at times of coronavirus. Facing up to these challenges, but still achieving teamwork, soil building, compost building, learning, and a great achievement for everyone on the team to be able to pull that course off in spite of all of the challenges of 2020. And we're going to have to keep on these processes regardless of how challenging it is, because I don't see any other better way to rise to the ecological challenges of times. So these last few photos are things I've collected off the internet. They're not my pictures. I got this off Natalie Topa I think she's in Kenya, and these pictures are from Burundi. Again, steep mountainous country. As the forest gets removed through farming, soils become compacted. What starts to happen is when we get these heavy tropical downpours, sometimes energized by climate change, instead of that water soaking into the ground where it stays around and it becomes useful, it sheets off and causes gully erosion. And as gullies start to enlarge, they get bigger and bigger, the water gets steep, accelerates, and you get a spiraling destructive process. So these trenches are on contour, and they're there to receive that surface water. When it rains very heavily, that water can't all soak into the ground at once. And so it's to allow that water to settle and to give it time then to percolate in where it can't erode. The place to store water is in the soil. And once it's soaked in there, it can't then cause erosion, and it becomes available to plants long term. So these are, and just think about how powerful this could be over large scales. This is just hard work. It's not complicated. It's not difficult. It's attainable by any community. Especially say in the tropics, these techniques are very, very important and very effective. Here's another set of techniques. So once a gully erosion is established, how the hell do you stop it from getting worse and worse? And he's again using whatever you have available locally and naturally. We've got bamboo, we've got palm leaves, we've got boulders. Constructing mini permeable dams across the gully. So what happens is if we get a tropical heavy downpour, water comes down laden with silt, the heavily carrying soils, erosive power of water, it's slowed down. It might not stop, but if it slows down, it can't carry as much silt, so it starts to deposit behind these structures. Slowly, with these kind of interactions, the ravine, the erosive gully can then slowly fill itself up again, can backfill, and then we can stabilize that then with deep-rooted plants. So these are simple techniques which show we can restore degraded and damaged landscapes on a large scale. We need to get busy on this now, because we're already in a situation where we're seeing whole systems breaking down. A few pictures from Jeremiah Kidd. These are from New Mexico in the United States. I believe this is an old coal mine, open cast coal mine. And again, similar techniques using organic materials pinned, these like straw bales, pinned on contour, so that when the rain comes, any organic matter traveling downhill, any soil particles that will accumulate behind the organic matter, which obviously will start to biodegrade, release its nutrients, start to build soil. Birds come, wind blows, seeds blow in, natural regeneration happens. Won't take long, a couple of seasons, before this whole landscape then disappears and becomes covered in plants again. And but it's also, once nature's been degraded to the point of bare rock or bare soil, it's very difficult then to sort of climb its way out again. So what we're doing, these interventions help accelerate these processes. This is very, very important. Again, it shows the potential of what could be done using just natural materials, organic matter, to allow landscapes to naturally regenerate. This is what we have to do going forward. We have to allow nature to recolonize these damaged areas. And I put this slide in to remind us that the plant's knowledge now is extraordinary, and there are plants with deep roots that help stabilize landscapes, build soil, feed soil microbes, build mycelial nets within the soil, maybe feed birds, create useful crops, medicines for people, for biomass, for fibers. So we can select very carefully what plants we put into a landscape that we're trying to regenerate. So it becomes not just about the ecological functioning, it also becomes about the yields, again, which must support wildlife or support human settlement. Permaculture is trying to design for all of those considerations. Here's another nice photo I saw on Facebook or something. I grabbed it. I forget where it's from. Where is it? America? Is it South Africa? I don't know. But it's obviously from a place where there was a lot of mosquitoes. And the response to, obviously, this is back in the time of black and white photos, and you see the size of this thing, that gentleman there with the hat on, it's a bat roost. And I understand that this bat roost was installed to regulate the population of mosquitoes in this area. They've obviously settled in some kind of a swamp. And before having DDT or before having whatever pesticides, the natural way to do that would be to boost the population of the predator species. The bats eat the mosquitoes, the bats drop guano, which is full of phosphate, which feeds the plants, which helps the ecosystem go forward. If we go in there with our pesticides and we kill the mosquitoes, then there's nothing for the bats to eat. They die, they move away, and then that nutrient cycle is broken. And I think it's a great illustration of where we've gone wrong, and perhaps how we can reforge our relationship with nature, with the natural world. So we'll finish with a quote from Robert Owen, seeing as we started with one, from New Lanark Mill in Scotland. Robert said, "In this new world, all will know that far more happiness can be obtained by union than by disunion." In other words, together we're stronger. If we cooperate, we have collective bargaining, we form trade unions, we actively support each other through solidarity, then we can achieve much, much more. And I think this is the message that we have to take forward and learn from. So from my animal friends who I share my home with, cat number 1 and cat number 2, who constantly remind me and make me think about our relationship to the natural world. All that remains to say is Happy Christmas, Joyeux Noel, Nadolig Llawen, as we say in Wales. I'll leave you this beautiful picture from a Kikuyu artist in Kenya. These strong, beautiful but graceful animals graze the land, give us milk, help sustain us, and make us think about that never-ending cycle between relationship between ourselves, the natural world, the landscape, the moon, and the nourishment that sustains us. So I wish you all a happy solstice and a successful and prosperous 2021.